Why were 9 players drafted above Paul Pierce? Have you ever thought back on some NBA drafts and realized that some NBA legends were taken so late? Well, that can be said for Paul Pierce, who suffered the same fate, but overcame the obstacles and became a stellar ball player. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the 9 dudes that ended up getting drafted ahead of him in the 1998 draft. And make sure you stick around until the end of the video to find out what other NBA legend was drafted with a pick right before him and see how that turned out. The number 1 overall selection in that draft involving Paul Pierce was Michael Olowokandi. People believed that this young man had, and I quote, unlimited upside when entering the league. He was so high up on everybody's draft board, so there was no doubt in the Los Angeles Clippers' minds that he was going to be their first overall selection. They fell in love with his offseason improvements as a player and his hard-working mindset. He averaged 8.9 points and 7.9 rebounds throughout his rookie season and really didn't look that bad. He had to undergo surgery on his left knee, though, and wound up missing a lot of time. Regardless, he marginally improved the next time he was out on the court, but had some off-court issues, specifically bad-mouthing teammates after a brutal loss one night. Olowokandi chose to stay with the team that drafted him despite other organizations having heavy interest in him. He remained a member of the Clippers for another year or two and then underwent another knee surgery. That next offseason, he went to the Minnesota Timberwolves and spent his next 3 years there. Towards the end of his stint, he was arrested following a nightclub incident and then got suspended by the league for 4 games just a few months later for getting into a fight during a game. He got traded to the Boston Celtics after that and was forced to retire early due to a multitude of knee injuries that he had to continuously get surgery to fix. He's now considered one of the biggest draft busts of all time. Mike Bibby ended up going 2nd overall to the Vancouver Grizzlies. Bibby was supposed to go number 1 until the Clippers fell in love with somebody else last second. Either way, he stayed with them for a few years and played great, winning Rookie of the Year honors and averaged over 15 points per game. The team relocated to Memphis and then traded Bibby to the Sacramento Kings. He spent the next 7.5 years with the Kings and had a number of memorable game-winning shots. He was so good with them, he signed a ridiculous 7-year, $80 million contract with them and had a strong reputation as a clutch shooter. He's now known as a legend to the Kings fan base, a player they will never forget. Bibby then went to play for the Atlanta Hawks for a couple seasons, and then the Washington Wizards and the Miami Heat. He ended his career with the New York Knicks the year after that. Just those Sacramento years alone, though, proved that he was deserving of a top pick in the draft. The only problem was that the team who drafted him gave up on him after just 2 seasons. It was a horrible decision for them, but ended up great for the Kings. The 3rd overall selection was Raef LaFrentz. LaFrentz came into the league with a lot of high expectations by the Denver Nuggets. He played great in his first 12 games, but tore his ACL right after that and missed the rest of his rookie season. He had some more great performances the following years and was really consistent for quite a while. The team then used him as a trade bait and flipped him to the Dallas Mavericks, where he actually had a season where he finished 2nd in the league in blocked shots per game. He played in the 2002 FIBA World Championships but was traded to the Celtics when he returned. He spent 3 years there and then was traded to the Portland Trail Blazers, where he would end his career. Despite some high expectations and solid performances, he never really reached that ceiling that everybody thought he might have. Now, don't get me wrong, he was a great role player with a solid floor, but he just wasn't what people expected he might be throughout his career, and he bounced around from team to team. The Toronto Raptors nabbed Antawn Jamison, number 4 overall, after LaFrentz was off the board. The Raptors traded his rights away to the Golden State Warriors, where he played out his entire rookie contract. He became best friends with Vince Carter and even dropped 51 points in a game. He had averaged 25 points per contest one year, but was traded the year after to the Dallas Mavericks. He spent the rest of that year there before getting traded again to the Washington Wizards. He ended up being pretty happy there, so he stayed there for the next 6 years, having a few phenomenal scoring efforts despite some terrible seasons record-wise. somehow he managed to get traded again, this time to the Cleveland Cavaliers. He played with LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh, and it was a great 2 years. He considered retirement at the end of 2012 following a season-ending surgery, but signed with the Los Angeles Lakers in 2012 for 1 year. He wasn't very impactful, but had a lot of fun on that team, so much so that he signed with the LA Clippers for a year after that. He got traded to the Atlanta Hawks after that season, but got waived right away, retiring at that point. Jamison was one of the great scoring players of his time, so I wouldn't say that this team got the pick wrong whatsoever. Props to them for that draft pick. Now, speaking of Vince Carter, he was selected 5th overall. He was flipped for Jamison in the draft, which means he went to the Toronto Raptors. He had absolutely stellar seasons with them and was quickly recognized as one of the most explosive players of his generation. He's often known as the greatest Raptor of all time, right alongside guys like DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. Sadly, though, he couldn't finish his career there as the team fired every coach on the roster following a bad season. Carter grew upset and wanted to leave the team. He got traded to the New Jersey Nets in a big deal and spent 5 years there. He was then traded to the Orlando Magic and then the Phoenix Suns. He signed with the Dallas Mavericks in a bit of a veteran leadership type of role, and then after 3 years he signed with the Grizzlies. He spent 3 more years there and signed with the Kings and then the Hawks. After that lengthy career, it turned out he was without a doubt an absolute steal at number 5 for the Raptors, if only he'd been treated better by their upper management up in Toronto. The 6th overall pick in 1998 was Robert Traylor by the Mavericks. Now, let's be honest here, guys, he wasn't the best decision that the team ever made. He got traded right after the draft to the Milwaukee Bucks for a player that we'll talk about a little later. Make sure you stick around until the end of that video to find out who that player was, but for now, we're going to stick with Traylor. He played there for a little while, but didn't really do anything super interesting to stay with the team, and then he had surgery on his aorta before signing with the New Jersey Nets after that. However, he failed a physical and the deal fell through. He had battled a lot of weight issues at that point and played some international ball to get his mind off things. Sadly, though, he passed away due to a heart attack back in 2011 while on the phone with his wife. A lot of people were absolutely shocked to hear this news, and it's a shame he wasn't able to live longer. My heart definitely goes out to all of his friends and family after all these years. Moving forward now, the Kings drafted Jason Williams 7th overall. That's white chocolate himself. He was absolutely explosive in his 3 years with the Kings, making tons of flashy passes and definitely creating a name for himself. He had numerous problems off the court with the police, the team, and the NBA as a whole, but man, were his passes insane. He got traded to the Grizzlies after those years and spent the next 4 with them. The team believed that he just didn't care about playing for them and was lazy with the ball, so he got traded to the Miami Heat. He spent 3 more years there and kept similar scoring averages throughout his career. Over the next 2 years, he would sign with the Los Angeles Clippers, then retire briefly, then sign again with the Orlando Magic. After that, he returned for 1 more year with the Grizzlies before actually retiring for good due to injuries. There's no question this dude was a great player, but it's clear he may have had a few too many issues to be taken that highly in the draft. Number 8 overall was Larry Hughes by the Philadelphia 76ers. Hughes played for an abundance of teams and was always known for his athleticism and defensive abilities. He played for the 76ers, the Warriors, Wizards, Cavaliers, Chicago Bulls, Knicks, Sacramento Kings, Charlotte Bobcats, and the Orlando Magic. He had a few massive contracts along the way and got traded around a lot, but he did have some good seasons. All in all, though, I wouldn't say he was worth that number 8 overall selection by the 76ers, especially when you consider the next couple guys on our list that were behind him. He really only stayed in Philly for a few years before being flipped around quickly, so in terms of the 76ers pick, it was awful due to his limited time there, but he was an overall solid player with great seasons for some other teams. Finally now, the last player drafted in front of Paul Pierce was none other than Dirk Nowitzki. And when we talk about his career, we all know he didn't really travel around a lot. He was one of the few players who stayed with the team that drafted him his entire career. Though he technically wasn't drafted by the Mavericks, the Bucks picked him and then traded him over to Dallas in exchange for Robert Traylor, the man that we talked about earlier in this video. Dirk led the Mavericks to a huge amount of success and turned them into a big-name organization throughout his career where other players really wanted to come and play for them. He even won a remarkable championship in a season where the Heat had their big three together. Dirk is now recognized as one of the best players of all time and one of the few people who probably genuinely should have been drafted ahead of Pierce. Pierce was finally taken off the board at that number 10 spot by the Boston Celtics. He had some really tough things going on in life, including being stabbed multiple times out at a club, an incident that could have killed him. He somehow, though, rose above it and became an NBA champion with the Celtics. He left after 15 years with the organization and played 1 year for the Brooklyn Nets. It was fairly uneventful, and he went to the Wizards for another year after that, and then the Clippers, and finally another deal with Boston to officially retire as a member of their franchise. If this were a redraft, there's no doubt in my mind that he would be selected in the top 5 compared to how some of these other players wound up turning out. Hey, that just about does it for this video regarding the 9 players drafted above Paul Pierce in the 1998 NBA Draft. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave us a like and a subscribe because it really does help our channel out a lot. Now check out why were 4 players drafted before Kevin Garnett. That's up next.